Greetings, brothers. Today we're looking at two of the mightiest dreadnoughts that the Blood Angels can field, the Relic Leviathan Dreadnought and the Primaris Redemptor Dreadnought. So both of these guys have been finding their way pretty reliably into my 9th edition lists, so I want to do a comparison and find out why. If we're just meeting, I'm John, the Blood Angels Commander. This channel is 100% focused on Blood Angels, so if you like the video, like it, and if you want to see more, subscribe. So the Relic Leviathan is a lot of points, let's not lie. 330 points to be precise with this combination, which is the Storm Cannon and the Claw. I do see some people running 2 Storm Cannons. I mean, maybe that's a bit more effective in 9th now that you can shoot in close combat, but I really like the Claw. We, as a Blood Angels player, you know, we get an extra 1 inch to our charges, and we get an extra attack once we get into Assault Doctrine. It's going to take him a couple of turns to get across the battlefield anyway, so when you do get into combat he's probably going to have 6 attacks, and the +1 to wound is maybe kind of lost on him in that his Claw has 16 strength, but 330 points in this combination, and I'm really digging it. So the Redemptor Dreadnought comes in at 180 points. This is the easy to build variant with the heavy onslaught cannon, the flamer, the Redemptor power claw and the Fragstorm grenade launchers. So this guy's not really any use against armor, but he is decent, especially if you did pick up the easy build version, and he comes in at 180 points. So what I'm working on probably painting next is the actual regular guy with the Macro Plasma Incinerator, the Rocket Pods, the Storm Bolters, which are kind of better than the Frag Storms just because Bolter Discipline on Dreadnoughts means there's no penalty for moving and shooting, and then the Onslaught Cannon underneath, and the rumour is this Onslaught Cannon I believe is going to go up to 8 shots in Strength 6 where it's currently 6 shots in Strength 5. So and then the Claw, obviously. So this guy is pretty interesting, and he comes in at 186 points. I magnetise the Rocket Pod so we can get him in for 181, depending if we need a few extra points in an army list. That was a very easy magnetise to do. And it's kind of mad to me that you could almost have both of these guys. Both of them together would be like, what, 366? So if you had the 2 Storm Cannons on the other Dreadnought, it's only 15 points more. So I guess let's dive into all the other stats and see why the Relic Leviathan is just so many more points. Actually, before we move on, it's also worth mentioning that the Relic Leviathan requires you to have another heavy support choice because he is an ancient relic, and there's essentially a tax on taking a relic in your army. So if you want to take him as a heavy support option, you need to have one other heavy support option. So let's talk about survivability. The Relic Leviathan is tough to wound and even tougher to kill. He has a toughness of 8 and 14 wounds. He has a normal 2+ armor save and then a 4+ invulnerable save. So the Redemptor's no chump. He's got 7 toughness, he's got 13 wounds, and he's got a 3+ save. However, he's quite susceptible then to las cannons, plasma guns, meltaguns, which are all very common, even power fists. These are all very common things in the 9th edition. So straight away you can just see that a lot of those extra points are literally in the invulnerable save, and what a difference that invulnerable save can make on the battlefield. There's 2 key stratagems to talk about when we try and keep these dreadnoughts alive. The first one is Duty Eternal. You declare it before your opponent rolls to hit. So you pay 1 CP in the phase, and then your opponent will roll to hit or whatever. So when it's declared as a target, pay your 1 CP, and then any damage done by the weapon or for the rest of the phase is reduced by 1 down to a minimum of 1. So if you've been shot by like a high power plasma cannon that's going to do 2 damage a pop and 3 get through, if you've played this stratagem, rather than taking 6 damage you only take 3. So yeah, it's very powerful. You can use it wisely, and it can really, on the Relic Leviathan, it can be almost like once you've played that, people might actually be scared to keep shooting at it just because they know how difficult it's going to be to take down. Just have to be very careful if you're going to run these 2 dreadnoughts. Remember that you can only play these stratagems once per phase, so if they do open up on one dreadnought, beware if you play it there, then it could expose your other dreadnoughts. So you have to be wise. And then the second stratagem here is the Armour of Contempt. So the Armour of Contempt is very much the same as Duty Eternal. You play it and it lasts the rest of the phase, so the shooting phase or the close combat phase. And what it does is every mortal wound the Dreadnought would take, so like if you're playing against Chaos and they're firing like their Hellfire bolts, I think they're called, that do like D3 mortal wounds, on a 5 and 6, on a D6, for each mortal wound, your Dreadnought could ignore it. So normally there is no save against mortal wounds, so this is a way that you can give your Dreadnought, and actually this stratagem's for vehicle, so it can be used in any Blood Angels vehicle, and it's a great way to just protect against some mortal wounds. So this stratagem also costs 1, so it's like you can use it quite often, and again, Used wisely within the phases, it's a really good way of protecting these guys and letting them get across the battlefield into close combat or onto an objective or whatever it is you need them to do. So if you look at each model in terms of shooting, in the configuration that I have with the Relic Leviathan, you get your 10 Storm Cannon shots, you get your 2d6 Heavy Flamer shots, and you get a Metal Gun shot. On the Redemptor, on the other hand, you get the D6 Macro, Plasma, Incinerator shots, you get your 6 Onslaught Cannon shots, you get your 8 Heavy Bolter shots, and then you get your D3 Rocket Pod shots. So if we look at some raw damage, for example, from, let's say, against a toughness 5 enemy, your Relic Leviathan has your 10 Storm Cannon shots, so they usually hit on 2s, so you get like 8 to 10, 9 hits, something like that. Then they would wound on 3s, so let's say like 6 wounds, and then that's 6 at -2, 2 damage a pop. Your Heavy Flamers, 2d6, roll that, maybe be like an average of about 6, so 4s to wound, so 3 Heavy Flamers at -1, and then your Meltagun, hopefully it hits, still hitting on 2s, you know, and then Strength 8, Toughness 5, so that would be a 3 again, and then that's d6 damage with a -4, so potentially, I mean, it's very easy to see the Relic Leviathan doing somewhere between like 15 and 20 wounds is a definite possibility. I suppose it's just quite a few of the weapons are short range. I mean, even the Storm Cannon is short range in 24 inches. So, but I mean, this guy is hunkering forward through the battlefield, trying to get on objectives, trying to fight, trying to shoot. So I think it's fair to say he'll do quite a bit of damage in the shooting phase. Now there's another great 1 CP strat that you can use with this Dreadnought, which is Wisdom of the Ancients, so you can re-roll your 1s. This actually works for both, and again it's per phase, so you could hit with all 10 Storm Cannon shots. I kind of feel like if you were going to use Wisdom of the Ancient, because it's a bubble of 6 inches around the Dreadnought, you'd want to have something else around, especially with the Relic Leviathan. I'm not sure the 1 CP is really worth it, unless you get another few units close by that are also going to benefit from this. I mean, you're hitting and you're doing enough damage anyways. So the Redemptor Dreadnought, if we start with the Macro Plasma Incinerator, it's got its D6 shots, so you're rolling that, and it average of about 3, but remember it is a blast weapon, so if you hit a squad with 6 or more guys in it, it's 3 by default, even if you roll less. So you get your 3 shots from that, hitting on 3s, so you would say 2 hit. Strength 9, or sorry, Strength 8, I suppose 9 if you go to high power. So against your Toughness 5 enemy, it's still going to be 3s either way, so that's a couple of wounds, or maybe 4 wounds if you're risking the high power. If you're using Wisdom of the Ancient, then I guess it's less risky to use the high power because you can reroll the 1s. I mean, losing 1 mortal wound on this Dreadnought when it's got 13 wounds might not be the end of the world, but it's something just worth considering. Then you've got your 6 Onslaught shots, so they currently have Strength 5, so it would be 4s to wound and 3s to hit, so maybe out of your 6 you hit 4, so 2 more wounds. So you're talking now 4 to 6 wounds, and then your rocket pods D3, so you'd hope you'd get 2, hitting on 4s against ground targets and 2s against flying. Well, most things are ground, so 1 rocket pod hit, Strength 7, Toughness 5, so it's like a 3 again. So rocket pod could do another 1 or 2 damage, and then finally you've got your 8 Stormbolter shots, hitting on 3s again, so it's like maybe 5 or 6 hits. And wounding only on 5, so probably only 2, maybe 3 wounds, and yeah, so like you can see straight away it maybe can do like 7 to 10 damage depending on a bit of luck. And also I suppose I feel like the reroll 1s is a bit more valuable on this guy just because his hits are slightly less. So yeah, probably like 7 wounds on average. Maybe if you pay the 1 CP he can do like 10 wounds. Or maybe if you command reroll your plasma shots to get more than 3 or something, you know, you could maybe do some more wounds, but any weapon that's just like a d6 roll for the number of shots is quite unreliable. So he's a bit more unreliable, but you can still do some damage, and if you do roll the 6 on the plasma, then you are going to be doing quite a bit of damage, probably in the region of like 12 to 14 wounds. So yeah, when it comes to shooting like that, the 180 point model is actually kind of okay, but I think that the Leviathan is just going to be much more reliable. He's just going to always do a lot of damage with that Storm Cannon, and he's going to do a lot of wounds. I can see why some people like the 2 Storm Cannons. I mean, that's up to you. I like crushing things in melee, and we're going to come to that very soon. So I think these guys are both super fun to play. In their top profile, they both move 8 and they can kind of weather a storm, and your opponent kind of maybe has to choose one, and even if he does choose one, then you can maybe pay your duty of Eternal to keep them alive. So they move down the battlefield pretty steadily. And when we talk about attacks, they both have 4, so they get an additional 1 from being Astartes, the shock and all. And then once we get to turn 3, which I really think you're not going to do too much combat with them before turn 3 unless you maybe get off like a 12-inch charge or something. So once they get to turn 3, they get an additional 1 from Savage Echoes, so it's 6 attacks on both of them. So the Leviathan, let's say he gets his 5 attacks and he hits on 2s, so probably 4 or 5 hits in there, and then he's pretty much going to wound anything in the game on 2s because his strength is 16, and then as a Blood Angels you get +1 to your wound rolls. So yeah, you're going to wound just about anything on 2s, and then it's a -3, flat 3 damage. Remembering if it is turn 3 and we're in Savage Echoes, then it's -4, so at that point nothing is really saving except invulnerable saves or 6s. It's also important to note that the Siege Claw lets you reroll all wounds against infantry. So your 6 attacks, and then your 2s to hit, probably 2s to wound, and then re-rolling, you're pretty much just going to kill 6 infantry if he ever gets in contact with them. I think in my last game he did 9 damage in a 5 attack swipe, but I mean I think 12 is very realistic as well. And then a Redemptor, same number of attacks, so 5 hitting on 3s, so 3 or 4 go through, then it'll be strength 14 because he's double strength as well, and he gets the +1 to wound, so again it's pretty much wounding everything in the game on 2s, so you get about 3 through, and again it's -3 or -4 if we're in Savage Echoes, so, and then it's a d6 damage. So typically you're going to be getting like, what, maybe 3 hits if you're, maybe 4 if you're lucky, but even on 3 hits you've got the potential there to do 18 wounds. I think in my last game I actually got 5 hits, so 5d6 wounds. Not many things are surviving against that. Again, you could play Wisdom of the Ancients to reroll your 1s for hits in this phase if you really felt like you needed a bit more damage. I mean, it's possible. So yeah, moving on then from close combat, we talk about leadership. So their leadership is 8, but I mean it's kind of irrelevant. They both share 8. There's not much that they need leadership for unless we have some enemy with psychic powers or something like that. So if these guys do get profiled, then they lose 1 ballistic skill for each profile. They have 3. So on the worst profile, your Redemptor's hitting on 5s and your Leviathan's hitting on 4s. And the Redemptor loses 2-inch movement, so 8, 6, 4. The Leviathan actually loses 3, so it's like 8, 5, 3. Yeah, so I mean the Leviathan really does get slowed down if he does get profiled heavily, but I find it's very difficult to profile him heavily, especially if you're using your stratagems right. So as far as other stratagems go, we already talked about Wisdom of the Ancient, we talked about Duty Eternal, and we talked about the Armour of Contempt. All very good, all 1 CP. The stratagem that I want to open your eyes to is Unbridled Ardour. So I love this stratagem, it's so effective, and what it does is it lets any unit in your Blood Angels army, so it could be a vehicle, it could be a dreadnought, it can be a character, they can change their heroic intervention distance from 3 inches to 6 inches, and it's 1 CP. So if your dreadnought is ever within 6 inches of another unit, you can basically heroically intervene. And with these dreadnoughts, with their power fists, or their claws, or their version of power fists with the 2x strength, doing strength 14, strength 16, +1 to wounds, you can pretty much guarantee all your wounds are on 2s, and it can surprise people. They charge another squad, your dreadnought's 6 inches away because you've kind of positioned him there anyway, so the other squad will maybe get Wisdom of the Ancient, and then you heroically intervene. And even if they target the dreadnought, especially the Relic Leviathan, he can withstand most things, right? And then you just get to crush back with 5 or 6 attacks, depending on the turn. So with the new norm of having like 10 to 17 CP, it's like all 4 of these Dreadnought stratagems just being 1 CP. It really lets you play around some of these stratagems or these characters and keep them going throughout the game, and never really feeling like you're burning through your CP too quickly. So we want to talk about explosions next, and they're pretty fun when it happens. On a 5 or a 6, the Relic Leviathan will explode for a 9-inch blast, D3 mortal wounds. The Redemptor is quite evil as well in that it's a 6-inch blast, but it's D6 mortal wounds. So if these guys do die can potentially be quite nasty. So having them in close combat with the enemy is like a good place for them to die, because it could essentially wipe an enemy squad or two, or even a character, if they do down these dreadnoughts. So I actually really like both these guys, and I've got them both in my 9th edition army list. I run them right on the front of the battlefield along with like Commander Dante and Lieutenant, so they can do some re-rolling of both hits and wounds. And then once I've sort of moved out, I like to send them off and do their close combat. And it really gives sort of a terrifying gun line in that all the re-rolls, you're just gonna, you know, like it's like you re-roll, you shoot your storm cannon. Oh well, we've got 10 hits. Alright, we're gonna wound on like 2s, or we're gonna wound on 3s, and we're re-rolling 1s. Oh, it's 8 wounds, you know, like it's pretty crazy. And the Macroplasma Incinerator is the same. So doing this is like a really powerful gun line, and it just lets you take out enemy tanks or vehicles almost straight away. I killed a toughness 6 12 wound Lord Discordant with invulnerable save in turn 1. Just shot him straight off the table with the storm cannon and the Macroplasma Incinerator. So yeah, it's like it sets you up for a good close combat game after that if you just weaken some armor in turn 1. So yeah, against that Discordant, I believe 10 of the wounds came from the Leviathan Storm Cannon, so I can totally understand why some people run 2. For the moment though, I'm going to keep the Claw, and we're going to enjoy crushing some face in close combat. So I just really like the Claw against like deep strikers that are coming in for a charge, or like for that surprise 6-inch heroic intervention. The Claw just, to me, adds a lot of value, and Blood Angels kind of are all about close combat, so it's nice to have a big robot smashing face in close combat. So I feel like the Redemptor is just a bit more unreliable, but he'll still smash face. He can still roll 6 on this Macroplasma Incinerator, so yeah, I mean, I guess you understand why he's half the points. He doesn't save as much, he's not survivable, he's a bit more unreliable, but he can have like an amazing turn, so it's up to you where you put your value and where you spend your points. So as it stands, the Relic Leviathan with this cool Forge World chassis is about $75. And then your Redemptor Dreadnought, the easy build is probably like 25, and the regular is like 35. So it's kind of funny that the points on the board almost match the difference in price in real life. But I mean, if I was going to buy one and you don't have a Dreadnought in your army, and you do have something else that's heavy support, because remember you need the heavy support to take the Relic Leviathan, then I would definitely say get Relic Leviathan. It's up to you what you choose, but I'm having a lot of fun with the Storm Cannon and the Siege Claw. So thanks again for checking out the video. I really hope it gave you some thoughts and helped you figure out exactly what you want to do in the tabletop. I'll see you in the next one. By the blood are we made. Peace.